Welcome back to America's Forum. 5 years ago, the BP oil spill dominated the headlines as crude gushed into the Gulf of Mexico for almost 3 months. During that time, more than 3 million barrels of oil-drenched beaches and wetlands from Texas to Florida. The question is now, 5 years later, have things changed for the better? Let's get an in-depth analysis 5 years after the spill with Collin O'Mara, the president and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation, who joins us live from the Gulf. Collin, we appreciate your time. Let's cut to the chase. 5 years after the spill.
JD, thanks for having me on.
We're glad to have you, Collin. Are things better now?
I think there are some things that are improving, but wildlife is still suffering 5 years later. There's been reports coming out that dolphins are dying at 4 times the rate in this area that I am right here. This is Barataria Bay in Louisiana. We're still seeing impacts on Kemp's Ridley sea turtles. A range of species are still suffering. So as much as the cleanup did help bring some things back, we still have a long way to go in the Gulf.
Collin, as I understand it, BP, along with federal and state officials, just announced tentative approval of an additional $134 million in restoration projects. I understand BP already set aside $1 billion, that's billion with a B, but even with that kind of spending, is it just too little, too late in your estimation?
Yeah, so the billion they set aside is for some early penalties and some early kind of agreements that were reached. They're actually facing a $13.7 billion judgment right now in Louisiana. There's a court case for fines under the Federal Clean Water Act. The judge found them grossly negligent, and basically, if they find them responsible for the 134 million gallons that flew into the Gulf, they could pay up to $13 billion in fine. At that scale, you could begin to have the type of restoration that the Gulf needs.
And since you're the president and CEO of the National Wildlife Federation, what is your role in the cleanup, Collin?
So we help make sure that we're working with a lot of the state agencies right now to make sure restoration projects make sense for the Gulf. We're also collecting a lot of the scientific data, making sure we're sharing it with the public. The federal agencies right now are actually in the damage assessment, so there's not a whole lot of information coming out from the federal agencies. But we want to make sure that every dollar is spent on restoration in a way that helps improve the commercial waterman's economy here, the tourism economy, and brings back the Gulf to an amazing, really just vibrant ecological paradise that it has been for so many years.
Collin O'Mara, we appreciate your assessment of the cleanup thus far and the work that remains to be done. Thanks very much for joining us from one of those areas affected.